It's GG No Re. We're back after a long absence. Why? Did they say we pod faded again? Of course they would say that. But no, we were just playing Elden Ring.
Turns out we were all just maidenless.
Yeah. We were just playing Elden Ring. And we will talk about Elden Ring on another episode. In fact, we're probably going to record it right after this. But we're not talking about Elden Ring right now. We're talking about Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But we're talking about it.
Mm. Which is like the Elden Ring of conversations.
But we're not. Executed.
What?
Stefano has been arrested and executed.
You can't scroll TikTok during
Patriots
the
are in control.
Put an end to this madness.
But no, so we're going to talk about AD&D because we're not playing it. One, because it was just a demo, right? We weren't seriously going to play it unless it just blew our minds. It did not blow our minds, at least not in a positive way. And it's been like 2 months or something since the last time we played, and nobody remembers.
3.
Really? No.
I was looking at the episodes today to be like, hey, maybe I should listen to it. And the last release was January 24th.
Well,
Whoa.
the last time we recorded, but the last time we got together, because we didn't record the last time we got together, did we?
No.
Oh, we played with John as DM.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, but that was not recorded.
Yeah,
I wasn't
right,
there for that.
He did a thing.
Okay.
I don't think I was there for that.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's just GG No Re.
I don't remember anything. Everything was blur.
Okay. Well, anyway, so we're going to summarize our AD&D experience. By the way, if you want to check out the expansion of the starter AD&D dungeon that's in the DMG, that is the first edition Dungeons & Dragons dungeon, you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/GGNoRe. Somehow, people still join it and then like talk to us in our Discord and enjoy the stuff we put up there because we haven't put out content in 1,000 years. But yet we still have people talking and... there's chatter.
I don't understand it.
Chatter, there it is. If you want free stuff you can use in your game, well, it's not really free. You pay $1. If you want to pay $1 and then use stuff in your games, there it is. So if you listen to the previous episodes and just want a free, not free, $1 dungeon, go check that out. Patreon.com/GGNoRe. But we are now going to summarize our thoughts and prayers about AD&D. I will start. I can see why people like it and why there's a little bit of a renaissance of running AD&D by the rules, by the book online these days. However, I found it very, very expensive in the mental overhead. And I understand that over time one acclimatizes to these sorts of things and ingests it, and it becomes natural to one. However, I can't be bothered at this time in my life to do so. Mm. So that's one reason, because I feel like if I want to run a game of D&D, I don't need all the AD&D bells and whistles to do so. If I want a complex simulation, I feel like I would just be better off making up my own stuff.
I remember basically nothing about what we actually did, but I'm looking at my character sheet, which remains in its place at the table.
It's been there. You probably can't even lift it off the table.
Yeah, it's crusted,
It's written in the old tongue.
Yeah. I'm looking at this cyclopean, horror in front of me, which is all these numbers and tables, etc. I remember there's just a lot of numbers, a lot of different things for this type of defense, this type of attack. And I'm just like, I just can't. There literally was a time where that was fun for me, and I cared. This is not that time. It's no longer that time for me.
Yeah, there's nothing about this that makes me want to go back and remember what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no detriment to you at all. I mean, it just wasn't fun.
I have a special position as the GG No Re memory keeper.
Yes.
Like the memory vault.
Our mentat.
He who remembers.
Yeah. Roll them eyes back.
The biggest problem with that fact is that I'm also very inexperienced with any type of D&D in terms of playing consistently or learning a system. So my experience is super subjective, and we had lots of fun, but I can't recall any of that fun having to do with the AD&D mechanics.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
But in fairness, a lot of the AD&D mechanics are longer term and don't really show themselves
Right.
over the course of 3 sessions.
We didn't even get the henchmen and hirelings.
Correct. We tried to, but then had to abandon it because of reasons.
Playing by the book and not enough time.
Yep, playing by the book, not enough time. The thing that's au courant right now is the 1-to-1 timekeeping, where you try to let an equivalent amount of days pass in the game world as passes in the real world.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah. Okay. And the thing is, you don't have to play AD&D to do that. So if you like that, you can just do that.
Do you think there are things about AD&D that you will use moving forward?
I actually might. I might, maybe without telling anyone, keep the weapon versus armor idea going on. What are some other things? I kind of like.
I like the last will and testament on the character sheets.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that's like actual AD&D rules or just on the sheet, because those are not all the same.
Yeah, no, but I just
sheet.
Even if it's an original AD&D character sheet, I love that they had that on there because it's fantastic.
It's pretty neat.
I felt like we actually engaged with downtime rules.
Yes, yeah, that is another thing. Because AD&D was meant to be played with a ton of people, not all playing at once, but in the same campaign. It does have a lot of rules that play into the 1-to-1 timekeeping and make it necessary and useful, such that like long recovery times, research, like even collecting, like putting out feelers for henchmen takes days, which means you can't be playing during that time. And then also when you level up in AD&D, and I know Jim loves this, although Jim is not here, rip. He's not dead that we know of,
Yeah.
but he's not here.
Hope not.
But Jim really likes this, and I've always hated it, but a lot of people like it. When you level up, you can't just level up when you have enough XP. You have to pay a trainer, kind of like in Skyrim or whatever.
Really?
Pay a trainer and spend a certain amount of time training, and then you level up. So sometimes part of your quest, like self-directed quests, are just to find a trainer that's high enough level to train you.
I hate that so much.
Yeah, I hate it.
Because I feel like if you're buying level, you should just buy level. Like the Skyrim thing. Like once you find the trainer, it's like I just want you to just randomly teach me like way more crap in archery, and I'll pay you for it. Like it's not like
I want a vending machine.
You know,
I think there was one trainer in Skyrim where you actually did a little like bow shooting mini game, and it helped you level up.
Oh yeah, you played Skyrim recently, right?
Yeah, fresh memory.
Is that like a new thing on Skyrim?
I remember in
17.0?
Morrowind, you could just jump everywhere and it increased your athletics.
There's the same way in Skyrim.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, you just run around like swinging a sword.
Yeah, the more
at
you do it,
nothing.
well, I mean, the more you do a thing,
Yeah.
the more experience and effectiveness you get it.
I don't have a whole lot of hours, but I got like 280 hours on Skyrim on Steam.
There's a thing.
And,
There's a thing.
I've got like 300.
I still don't remember anything about it. I usually just goofed off the whole
I
time.
remember a lot. I don't remember this trainer you're talking
Well,
about.
I just remember recently seeing a thing where people were the guy who sort of runs with you out of the dragon thing at the very beginning.
Oh, yeah.
You can apparently just stand there and wail on him and get like
And he doesn't
multiple.
die?
Yeah, he doesn't
Yeah.
even get hurt, but you
And he
get
doesn't aggro.
XP for it. And so you can just wail on him for like an hour and start the game at like level 40 or whatever.
Working as intended.
So I wake up, I'm on the cart, I get off, and I wail on it, and then
It's the One Punch Man method of storytelling.
But that's an example. So I think, and also that provided a money sink because of how treasure was dealt out and how it was tied to advancement. The characters are going to get a lot of money, and so DMs were like searching for ways to rid them of that money so they don't just become fabulously wealthy and then not have a reason to adventure. And so training costs become a big sink of your money. And then as a wizard, you need to pay costs for research and to make spells and potions and that sort of thing. And all that ties into the timekeeping, which is why Gary was famously concerned with strict timekeeping. You cannot have a meaningful campaign unless strict time records are kept, which I get that.
It does make sense with all of that, though, for there to be.
I would enjoy when you like. Whereas if we're doing real time, when it's real time when we're playing, like that's the time that we're playing, so it's at night.
Yep.
So then we'd have to meet in the day for it to actually.
That's good when you're in high
What
school.
was that the Game Boy Advance game that had a sensor on top? And when you'd have to go outside and like it would change the game. And then when it got dark,
I've heard of that.
There are a few
Sensor.
games. There are a few games that do something like that. It detects what time of day it is.
I just think all of that stuff, the concept is really cool, but I don't think it would be fun to actually have to mess with it.
Well, the thing is,
I don't mean just the time
That's
stuff,
the
but a
Simpsons
lot of
road
the
rage.
features. A lot of the features of AD&D, like the idea of weapons versus certain kinds of armor, makes sense, and it like heightens the realism a little bit, but actually having to sit there and computate all that stuff whilst playing, to me, does not add to the
well, the
fun.
thing is, like, we play in a totally different milieu than those guys did. They were all
Right.
war gamers,
Right.
And so they were just nerding out about that kind of stuff in general, and were very simulationist-y in
Right.
their
Well, think about.
tastes.
I like to
Boktai.
think about how much I would crave this
The name
if
of the
there
game.
weren't video games to play.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
I imagine that makes a big difference.
It
for
was
us.
Hideo Kojima actually.
Really?
Boktai. Yeah, for the Game Boy Advance. Sorry.
Innovative.
We're just super jaded
Figures.
because we have so many. Well, even the whole like game that we're going to talk about later, so I won't talk about now. There's different types of damage, and there's
Yeah.
different armors are better against, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I guess they were trying to account for
And
here.
it's cool and
Yep.
it's fun.
And that is cool, and it is fun in.
Because it takes like 1 second.
That right.
To-
That's what I'm
to
saying. I'm not
compute it.
having to whip out
But
a slide rule to calculate
even
it. You
like
know?
if we didn't have that example of something that takes 1 second, I still feel like, I mean, the example is D&D got popular.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we would crave this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think about when we were first starting to play 3.5 or whatever. We were much more into the minutia of stuff, and like everything was totally absorbing because it was all new, and there were like basically not really good alternatives. I don't know. The other thing is our tastes, as far as what we like in RPGs, are different than what they liked back then. Like, we tend to have a very protagonist-y view of our own PCs.
Right.
And to be, even though we're not like drama kids, we are more into the drama of what's happening rather than wanting to simulate, war games battles. But a cool thing about AD&D especially, but also all versions of D&D, is it's made so that you can just have one figure, like your guy, and then just treat him as 10 times that many, and then do the large scale combats.
Yeah.
So that's like why the layers have like hundreds of goblins. It's because you're meant to put like 15 to 30 goblin pieces on the board, and then you have your group of henchmen and
Okay.
stuff, and it's easy to do. It's just like a big skirmish battle.
That makes
So and everybody that played it at the time, at least in Gary's and Dave's group, they would have been they wouldn't have even needed that in the rule book. That's just natural for them as war gamers. Whereas it's not for us. I mean, maybe like 40K players, if they were playing D&D, they would naturally do that kind of stuff, but that's just not who we are. It's not who I am inside.
My brother-in-law plays 40K.
So it's a cool hobby.
Yeah, he does the miniatures. He does all that. Like I didn't know this about him until we like hung out at Christmas and started talking to him. And I was like, "Oh man, our interests are like this close." Like,
Yeah.
I can almost talk to you about what you're doing because I have some way of comparing what I do to it. And I was like, "Man, wish you did something else." You ever thought about playing D&D instead?
Yeah.
Because he's actually a cool guy. But anyway,
The other thing-
40K is neat though.
It is. The other thing I kind of liked all the fiddliness with initiative and segments and stuff. And I say kind of to mean I am very conflicted about it. But I when there's a genuinely new or different way of doing initiative or just any kind of procedure that's just standard now, like with NGR, Neoclassical Geek Revival, I think everyone likes how it does initiative, where it's in reverse,
Yeah.
and then you interrupt slower people. That was cool. And I also liked this like partial turn thing that we were doing in AD&D, where like you move part of your movement and things resolve, and then part is kind of like stop motion. I don't know if that's how they actually did it. That's just my reading of it. And a few other people online that play AD&D said that that's basically right. I thought that was neat, but again, it's probably not the kind of thing I would want to do all the time. I feel like a lot of this stuff is Gary's house rules and adjustments to the game that he's personally developed to suit his tastes and temperament, codified without like a clear demarcation between what's necessary for a systemic like fulfillment and just Gary's preferences. So it's hard to like find where the line is between those two things.
Right.
I feel like if it was just the core and that were stripped off as a separate system, it wouldn't be that unwieldy.
What if Gary saw his players as computers that he could use to run his game?
Yeah.
And that's how he got his enjoyment, because he was the actual player. He was playing his game through the CPUs.
I don't know what he thought about it. Gary
That's
was a
effed
lot.
up.
I do know Gary was a lot less like hard edged than like new adoptees of AD&D are. Like he would start people at level 3 instead of level 1. Like he was not just like you have to play it exactly like
Doesn't he
this.
say
And
something about that in the book?
I don't. Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
Like,
I think so.
I think there's like a foreword where he talks about like the rules of the game and how you're supposed to use them, and it's like, you know, not everything has to be ones and zeros.
There is a tension between running it raw, I mean in the text itself, between running it raw and then letting you adapt things as you need. But I'm glad we played it. I'm glad I got to run it. But I'm just never gonna
We can say
I'm
we
never
did
gonna
it.
take it as my own, I don't think. Because you can take a lot of the spirit of AD&D and use it in other systems. I mean, not every system, obviously. Like some very rules light story game is not going to happen, but you can make a basic D&D more A. You can take your B and make it more A if you desire. And you know, Thaco didn't exist yet. The way we did AC, where you just consult a matrix, it's not that bad. It's not the worst thing in the world. I wouldn't want to do it. I like doing the math in my head, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Probably the worst thing was just getting a handle on character creation, probably just because of the way the information was laid out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, it really was.
Plus, you get halfway through doing something and realize you needed to go back and change everything because you did it wrong because you skipped over one word. That may just be me.
And then just the process of combat was just so foreign, even though it was the same kind of stuff we do all the time. I know over if we did this for a year, at the end of the year, 65% of my concerns would not be there anymore because I would just be used to it. But I'm just not going to do this for a year. We will do homebrew systems or one shots of other things or that kind of thing in the meantime. Let's see, what other systems have we? Here we go. If we had to pick between AD&D and Pathfinder, which would you guys prefer?
I've never touched Pathfinder.
Okay,
Pathfinder
thank you for your contribution.
2? Does that count?
Yeah, that counts. Either one.
I mean, just the system? You can run any story?
Yeah, just the system.
I don't know. To be honest, Pathfinder was a little bit more streamlined once you got your character created.
It was. That's true. I mean, it's easier to understand the rules and how to run things.
But I would be constantly wanting to break out of whatever the system was, I guess, in both cases.
Yeah, I think I would choose AD&D, but not for mechanical simplicity, but just because of the kind of play it produces. Like AD&D is more grounded and like realistic than Pathfinder is. Pathfinder is more like modern and flashy, and it would produce aesthetics that way, which I wouldn't care for. But yeah, Pathfinder is simpler, probably just from information design. It just makes it easier to understand.
I guess my perspective is all level 1, so basically no flash.
Yeah.
I played Pathfinder a little bit, but I think someone else had developed the character that they just handed to me, and they were like, "You're just basically a fighter because it's
That's half the game."
Yeah, it is.
I know,
Half the game
I know,
is doing
and so
that.
I don't really. And I played for a while, but I didn't really have much of a perspective on it because I didn't do anything with actually making the character.
All right, Tim, 4E or AD&D?
4E.
I knew it. No hesitation.
He doesn't know what AD&D is.
No, he's forgotten.
I know enough to say that 4E was was simpler than this.
4E is definitely simpler than this.
Yeah.
We were talking about us and the patrons. We and the patrons were talking about 4E in the chat today. Not today. Past couple days. People's different experiences with it. The GG No Re crew here, we really cut our teeth on a lot of 4E before we started recording and making a podcast. We did like all the starting modules that they had on like one big campaign. We went for a long time.
Yeah, we
Playing
went through like
4E.
level like 10 to 15 type stuff, like the stuff they released.
Yep. So we are definitely familiar with that.
What a rare privilege.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't really remember anything that happened.
It was
like
it
story
was mostly fighting and
It's just going through modules.
The inconvenient
Lovely.
berries, or is that?
No, that's way before that.
before
It's
fifth
like a
edition?
decade before that.
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, before you ever started
Yeah.
recording.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah, we just did the official modules, and they link together. So
I got you. When I started playing with you guys, I think it was 5th edition had just come out.
Yeah, it wasn't long.
it's just like playing a fantasy themed XCOM.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh no, we played 4th edition when we went to DragonCon.
Yeah.
Last time.
Yeah.
And I died like within like the first like 3 minutes. Like we spent so much time there. There's a time lapse that because I set up my camera to record us playing like the whole thing, and I wanted to do a time lapse so you can see our hands moving. I moved for the first like 15 seconds of that, and then the rest is you can see me. I'm on my phone, and I'm just sitting back scrolling while you guys like I'll shift position every now and then. I'll get up.
What'd you do?
But man, it's awful, and it's like a minute and a half long because we played for like 3 hours.
Yeah. But let's not get off track
It was
talking
a fun
about
time.
4E. So maybe one day we'll have a 4E episode, a 4 episode, and we'll actually play a little bit of 4E. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a 4E redux and make it palatable. Don't get me started about that. We probably won't do that. Parting thoughts about AD&D. Do we have any? What's one thing that you guys liked about AD&D?
I have things, but I don't know. It's hard to separate your decisions from what the actual system is.
Well, don't worry about that.
Like our experience from the playthrough, or just what AD&D is, because I think
Do you need an
Either
answer
one.
now?
Either one.
Do you
Yes,
want-
now.
okay. No, I don't
Sometime
have any-
tonight
I don't
while
have
we're
anything.
recording.
I
That's
liked
No.
that it was super unforgiving. Like
Yeah.
the windy tunnel, essentially puzzle. You know, I thought
Yeah,
a covered
that was-
lantern would just be it, and then Tim died in the first room of
Yeah.
the dungeon.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and the poison rules that
Yeah.
that was fun, where he could still
Yeah.
have a chance to do something heroic before he died.
I did like the quirky rules.
Yeah.
Like the things that were quirky. Like how you get your stats is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And combat obviously is different. But yeah, just the quirky things, the things that kind of intangible.
Yeah, like so. For instance, in your spell descriptions, they take different times to cast.
Yeah.
and so tactically, you really have to think like, do I have enough time to cast this spell versus this other spell, and am I going to risk getting my spell getting it interrupted if somebody hits me with an arrow in the meantime or something like
Yeah,
that?
I was afraid to get in combat, and that may seem like a huge negative for some people, but it's actually feels more engaging when I'm afraid of the monsters and trying to figure out, you know, how to handle this dungeon without TPK.
Yeah. And I think we've already talked about the things that we did not care for so much. I do recommend every DM having a copy of the 1E DMG. It's a fantastic reference. It's like an encyclopedia. There's not a lot of, there's so many things in there that are just descriptive or advice or just resources of tables that don't even necessarily tell you how to implement them. Like there's a great one with gems and then the reputed properties of gems. That's just taken from real world sources. I'm sure he just opened up an encyclopedia or something and was copying stuff down.
Interesting.
But it's just a collection of stuff like that that's useful no matter what. And it's just good to read. It's big enough that you can read it and find something new most times you're going through it that's either interesting or something you definitely don't want to do. But it's not so long that it's a tome and you can't read it all. So definitely recommend that. And the PHB is fun just for the really detailed character creation stuff. And the way it's detailed is not like modern games are detailed as far as like picking feats and all this kind of stuff. But
They're silly.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, they are kind of
seriously.
silly. And it really goes in and makes your race and class very much more inflexible choices that have a lot of prerequisites and you have to think about more. And it's not super apparent until you read closely how all those things are interlinked. So if you can get a copy of the PHB, I also recommend that. And then the Monster Manual, of course, is classic. I mean, most of the monsters that are in there are in modern games, but they usually have nasty twists in AD&D that are not in later ones. Like ghouls are just horrible. Like they will just destroy you compared to modern D&D. I mean, that's the same as in basic as well. But I recommend picking them up in a way that doesn't profit Wizards of the Coast. So grab them secondhand or on the high seas or something like that, and have fun reading it and implement in your games however you can, or maybe just start playing it and make Uncle Gary proud. All right, Roll Tide. This has been GG No Re. We will continue playing RPGs. Which one we will play, what we will play, only the future can tell.
S'il vous plaît.
Exactly. So until next time, GG No Re.